Our next speaker in a series of videos on risk in architecture is David Gianotten, Managing Partner of OMA. He talks about how the best way to mitigate or manage risk is to engage, as he says, to the maximum with the client. That way, in building a relationship, great things can happen even before you put pen to paper.
Working with a large Asian client is much more direct than with a European client. The European client always has client reps in between. So the process of engagement is very different. You first need to convince the client rep to convince the client to be part of the process, and then you get to speak to that client. That also means that process has more time. You have a trial and error period. You can make some mistakes. In Asia, that's all very absent. It's very direct. You speak to the highest leaders in the organizations or in the governments, and you have a one-time shot. Yeah, you need to convince them then and now. And if it's a yes, it's a yes. If it's a no, it's a no. And that is kind of a very interesting thing in the risk-taking exercise. Is kind of you get that one shot, so you need to get it right. But also when you have that yes that you want to have, you have the full engagement. And then you can build out the risk that you want to take. So every time you stretch that boundary a little bit. In Europe, that is very difficult because you first need to find the realm. And when you define that realm, it's more or less set in which you can operate. You can never then extend it again because it has been through public engagement, it has been through all kinds of bureaucratic discussions in boards, and then the client is not really willing anymore to stretch that boundary. Well, in Asia, everything is so direct and incidental almost that kind of they constantly are willing to see where their space is, and that's a huge difference. I think another big difference is the procurement of projects and the risk clients take in that, and therefore how an architect can respond to it. In Europe, you're bound by all kinds of probatory rules, all kinds of response comparisons between architects. In Asia, you have a much more direct relationship with the client already when they are still selecting, and therefore you can really show much more of yourself and make them understand what a risk they take when they work with you. So it's also a much more balanced situation in Asia. They take that discussion forward based on a personal relationship rather than based on 4 panels, 300 words and a financial statement. So I think these two things are very different, and then of course during the process almost everything is different in the sense of kind of how specifications are made, how meetings work, how you work with contractors, how you can define tender processes in Asia, while in Europe that is all completely set by regulations. So there's much more flexibility, and because of that you can take more risk and therefore get another outcome in which you can also see that an architect had influence on that process and on the moves that were made to create the building. I think every project in a sense is so different in our practice. Even of course there's a methodology, but that methodology is also constantly criticized by ourselves. And through that criticism internally, which can be quite tough discussions, but constant questioning ourselves, constant questioning the project, constant questioning the relationship within that project, we constantly do new inventions internally and also kind of personally, because you need to really give your personal best in that dialogue to refresh every single step we take, and that is kind of interesting because within a project we start the journey but we never know what our next stop is, and you also therefore never know how to have the dialogue with your staff, how to have the dialogue with the client. You will find it out along the way. So what is very interesting is that we take a lot of risk during the process because we go also in directions that in the end are a dead end. And then we just have to pull it back. And also then you need to be very honest to yourself, to your staff, but also to the client. That kind of it was a very interesting idea, but that didn't deliver what you had expected, and therefore we do something else. So the risk we take in that process is rather large, and because of that we put a lot of speed in it. So I think that the only thing you can say is there is a methodology, and we constantly keep it going so that it never reflects back and so that it never is the same. Because if you take too much time, you will start thinking about, oh, I did that in the past, should that work here? And that is never part of the dialogue, because we constantly keep on moving and moving and moving and moving.